Or maybe somebody willing to get out of their chair who has pants on. Probably the girl in the skirt doesn't have so forward. That would be nice.
Good shot.
They're right there on the table. Take one down, pass it around.
I got really talking about it.
Eric, can I squeeze in next to you?
Absolutely. You won't see that
If you realize how many people
Yeah.
across me.
I'll take you back for the sake of everybody else.
Is semantic meat in here?
I don't think so.
Thank you.
All right. You can stand there. I think that's the last space open is the doorway. All right. Today we'll be discussing sex and the non-religious, basically how to navigate your sex life now that you're an atheist or humanist, freethinker, secular sexual, however you would like to term it. And I'd just like to start by saying my name is Amanda Brown, and I will be exploring the different topics about sex, religion, and how a secular person should think about their sex life throughout the next 45 to 50 minutes. I would like you to feel free to ask a question at any moment in time throughout the entire presentation, regardless of how stupid or irrelevant you think the question is. I promise you it is relevant, and we all would like to know what that is. Just a little plug for my wonderful website. If you're ready to come out as an atheist, go to weareatheism.com, submit your video or essay, and we'll get you up there so everyone knows how awesome it is to be an atheist and it's nothing to be afraid of. Also, just in case you're unfamiliar with what I've done, I did the Sex and Secularism survey with Dr. Darrell Ray, and also helped him do a little bit of the analyzing of research for chapter 16 in his book, Sex and God. So, let's get this show on the road. Today we will be talking about a variety of topics. I'll start with what happens to your sex life after leaving religion, for those that grew up religious. And then I'll talk about, is there a difference for those who have been religious all their life, or who have been non-religious all their life, lovely typo, when it comes to their sexual activity, onset and attitudes towards sex. And then I'll look at what does it mean to be a secular sexual. That term was coined by Dr. Darrell Ray. And what does it mean to be safe, sane, and consensual within sexual activities? Different expressions of sexuality that have evolved over the years. Different types of relationships that are now open for secular sexuals. Sorry, that was really hard to say. What is BDSM, and how does that apply to spicing up your sex life? How to shop on a tight budget for new sexual experiences without having to go to the sex shops or sex websites, things like that. And then at the very end, I will tell you why this is important to seculars, humanists, freethinkers, atheists, etc. So, what is next after leaving religion? Basically, the entire world is opened up to someone who was brought up in a conservative household. According to the survey that I did with Dr. Darrell Ray, where we surveyed 14,560 participants who lived in the United States, we found an overwhelming majority of people who have been raised in a very religious household felt some form of guilt, shame, or fear regarding any form of sexual activity. Now, we thought this meant that there had to be some form of breakdown between communication of parents and children. And so we asked a question, basically, where did you get your sex education from? And those who answered in the most religious category or in the fundamentalist households, 13.5% said they got it from their parents. And most of those that they did receive from their parents was not very positive sex education. There were a lot of myths and trying to ensure children stayed abstinent rather than giving them real information. Next, after that, we asked them, where did you actually get your sexual experience from? How did you learn about these things? And majority said it was from porn. How many in here think porn is real sex? Only how sex happens when you actually have sex? No, it's not. So when you're 15 years old and trying to figure out what sex is because you're wondering why you want to do these things, you see all that craziness on porn and you think that's what you're supposed to be doing. Not a very healthy way to go about learning how to have sex with people. So after porn, there was also your peers. when you talk to your friends about sex and you get misinformation from them as well, hopefully 1 out of 10 of you has some form of real education. Obviously, it's not going to come from public schools anymore. That's abstinence-only education. And most of the abstinence-only education that's done, especially in the state of Missouri and Kansas, where I'm at, is run by churches. It is church people who form these groups and have basically a sex education kit that they hand out to schools, and they either do it themselves or have the teachers proctor it for them. And it's a lot of fear-based tactics, showing the worst of STIs, the worst situations that you could possibly get into, rather than the real types of situations that most kids would get into between the ages of 8 years old, when puberty is starting anymore, between 8 and 11, and by the time you're 16, which is typically onset of sexual intercourse. So, why would this be a good thing for religion? I find it's a great thing for religion because it requires the need for redemption. Every time you masturbate, every time you have sex, every time you kiss someone, you've sinned against God. So you've got to go back and get that redemption, get that forgiveness every single Sunday. But it's also a very bad thing at the same time. When you think about that, and you're constantly having to go back, and you're constantly having to get redemption or forgiveness for something that is considered a natural urge, and you start to learn that that's completely natural what you're feeling, and completely just a way to live life. It's okay to masturbate, it's okay to do these things. Why would God give you this urge and then tell you not to do it? It means God's a bitch and is giving you a temptation that you probably shouldn't have to deal with. Why would a God do that if that's really a God? I just feel like that's a bad deity to worship. So, how many of you, a lovely, beautiful photo, right? How many of you think masturbation was a big form of shame or guilt for the most religious? Those who are in a fundamentalist household. Good majority. Well, according to our survey, 22.5% of the most religious homes said they were ridiculed by a parent or guardian for masturbating. And when we mean ridiculed, here are a couple examples. Being caught masturbating caused me to be beaten until I couldn't stand up. Another person said, I used to masturbate and then perform the Islamic ritual cleansing and beg Allah for forgiveness. I tried to stop, but my sexual desire was worse when I didn't than when I did. I worried not only about sin, but also about the fact that my mother told me that if I masturbated, I'd have problems with my husband. These are actual examples that people gave us, and this is kind of just 2 little snippets. There are some that were even worse, and some that weren't really all that bad. So with all of that crazy information and almost abusive tactics, do you think that their sex life, those who grew up in the most religious homes, did it get better or worse after they left religion?
Better.
Much better. You'd be right. Kind of an obvious question, but we still asked it anyway. And oddly enough, the 35.4% that said it got much better was at a 10. And the 29.6% that said it was the same was right there at a 5. So you have from 5 to 10 there with differentiating marks from 30% to 35% in varying degrees between 5 and 10. There were only a small percentage that said it got much worse, but it was almost hilarious why they thought it was much worse. A couple people said it was because they used to have sex with all the Sunday school girls, and now none of them would have sex with them. And I'm like, well, yeah, for you that sucks, but should maybe look elsewhere. So it did get worse, but not all that bad. So there's our wonderful happy couples, and there's the much better. They got more people involved. So which denomination provides the most amount of guilt for your sex life? And think about this in kind of, which one do you think ranks the lowest, and then the worst?
Catholics are the worst.
Catholics the worst?
Or Baptist.
Mormons?
Mormon,
Pentecostal?
Islam.
Islam did not make the list. From lowest to highest, these were the top 6, ranked from 7 to 10 on our scale as the absolute worst. They give you the most amount of guilt associated with your sex life. We've got Southern Baptist, Baptist, Seventh-day Adventist, Pentecostal, Jehovah's Witness, and Mormon. They offer the most amount of guilt for your Sunday school pleasure.
No, that's specifically outside of marriage or marriages.
We
That's the
didn't
one.
delve into that detail. We should have. Honestly, I am going to do another one. I found many more questions to ask, and honestly, I wanted to give those who grew up secular all their life a lot more places to stand. That was something we overlooked. Didn't think there were that many people that were out there that had been secular all their life, and so it needs to be done again. Like every survey, you have to keep redoing and redoing. There's our wonderful picture of the Mormon. So our next topic, is there a difference from those who have been raised secular or non-religious all their life? Well, obviously they were not raised with the same amount or type of guilt that was forced onto them by their parents, but society still plays a role in how you were raised as a child. As well as their peers, and with 2/3 of the U.S. being Christian of some form or another, I think that the societal pressures do have a certain amount to influence those growing up to feel some form of shame or guilt, especially by females, as pretty much near the same as those growing up in a religious household. Here are some examples of what I feel are societal pressures that are put on normal society regardless if you are religious or non-religious. Slut shaming. This is typically put on women for sleeping with a lot of men, while men are praised for the high numbers of women that they have slept with. Double standard. The women have to sleep with the men, or other women, and men need to sleep with the women. It's kind of how the majority of society works. So if we're going to shame the women, we should probably shame the men. Another one is de-virginizing men as quickly as possible once their puberty sets in. That is a wonderful current trend going on. As soon as you are able to get that erection and you are ready and willing, you need to get rid of that virginity because it's just going to be a horrible burden on you until the end of time. It's horrible, but it's true. Purity of virginity in women before marriage as well. Don't understand why that's a societal pressure, but as our society, we still value it, unfortunately. We all know that most of us had sex before marriage. Anybody here virgin before marriage? Ah, 2. See, it still occurs. It typically is about 98% have sex before marriage. So can anyone think of other societal pressures that you grew up with that didn't revolve around your upbringing, but were literally brought onto you by your friends?
Fairly short engagement cycles. If you start dating somebody and you're not married within 2 years, there's something wrong with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If you have sex with somebody you don't love, you're a bad person.
Yep. The emotionality involving sex instead of sex being something for pleasure of both people. That's something that society has placed on us, and it is kind of backed up through religion. We could probably keep going on with more and more, but we'll move forward. So, is there a difference from those who have been raised secular versus religious? And if you look at your notes, because I know a little of this gets kind of skewed and confusing, there were survey results that we took, and based on the same questions that we asked from the most religious, those who claim to be least religious or non-religious their whole life, 38.2% receive some form of sex education from their parents. Go secular people. Thank you for talking to your children. But there's not enough. 40%? Come on now. That's sad. That's really sad. It should be 100%. There should never be a moment in time when you cannot talk to your child or your friend about sex. It shouldn't happen. It should always be an open conversation. And then next, kind of very similar to our wonderful most religious, they also got it from porn at about 25%. Peers were the same for the non-religious, which was around 20%. And 5.5% did feel shame, guilt, or fear through masturbation, even though they were non-religious. So that tells you how much societal pressure is in there for that masturbation. You just shouldn't do it, period. And when you look at this graph, it's kind of hard to determine what's going on because there's just so many cars and lines. But if you look at the colors of masturbation, petting, oral sex, and intercourse, and this is just penis to vagina intercourse, you can see that when you look at both blue lines, it's religious, non-religious at 15 in that first 2 columns there. And you can see that the onset is fairly similar. There's not really much of a difference in any of the bars going across both of those lines at 15. And same for 18 and then 21. It starts to get more and more even as the age increases. And that is also in accordance with other sex surveys that have been done in recent history. So ours was very similar, and it helped us make sure that we were keeping a good check in place for our survey. Now, what does it mean to be a secular sexual? A secular sexual is a person capable of making reasonable and rational decisions about their sex life while being open to new experiences. And this is very, very important. I want each of you to take on this term when you leave this place. Because being a secular sexual, I'm going to get this right soon, is a great person to be. You're capable of talking openly about sex. You're capable of understanding different points of view, even if it's not something you would like to do. So I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and if you answer yes to any of these questions, you do not adhere to being a secular sexual. Do you associate any shame, guilt, or fear with homosexuality?
No.
Do you associate any shame, guilt, or fear about different sexual activities in sexual play? Do you associate any shame, guilt, or fear with premarital sex? Do you associate any shame, guilt, or fear about masturbation? And last, do you associate any shame, guilt, or fear talking about sex in the company of others or even with an intimate partner? If you answered yes to any of these, then religion has a stronghold on you still, and you need to figure out why you are not comfortable with any of these. And I stress that to you.
I have a question about the fear category. So with premarital sex, when I see the fear, my response is these, like the picture was very young people, and I'm thinking if those people have only been had abstinence only, my fear for them is that they're not taking precaution. I don't know if that counts as fear. Is that, you know?
Fear regarding societal pressure to adhere to a norm.
Okay, thank you.
That's more that fear, not anxiety of doing the act itself. Because anxiety can be talked about and communicated with other people or partners. Yeah.
I had a question about like just talking about sex. I think one of the biggest issues when it comes to talking about sex is talking about like the big splash, the orgasm, and it's on both sides. So like getting a man to talk about his orgasm is probably one of the like hardest things to do. Even with like a woman, even when you are dating that woman, like trying to get talking about penis goes in vagina, and like that's the conversation. It's like there's more. So like how much do you dive into like to talk about the orgasm itself?
It should be completely talked about.
Yeah, I mean, but in your own, like in the studies that you hold, like how much, like, orgasm talk is there?
In studies that have been done, especially in the past with Masters and Johnson, now it's not considered ethically acceptable to do mini orgasm studies unless it's a scientific study of the orgasm, which means they're placing a probe inside the vagina to measure the orgasm and see how an orgasm happens. Other than that, there really isn't much on orgasms, as in, are there actual studies of how does a woman feel during an orgasm? Not really, since Masters and Johnson, that was a while back. That was way back.
What do they deem it unethical?
Yeah.
Research.
Can't explain it.
That's the APA for you, American Psychological Association. They deemed it unethical because they thought it was harmful to the participants. When they feel it's harmful to the participants participating in any form of survey or experiment done by psychologists, then you can't do it. It's really hard to get surveys passed by the APA and get that kind of backing.
They say fire.
Because they're frigid.
Other than saying the word it's harmful, they really didn't get into much of it. Yeah, I think you were first and then you.
On the homosexuality question, as a straight person, I have the homosexual sex doesn't appeal to me at all, and there's that initial disgust reaction, just like I would never do that. How much of that is me saying it's not something I would ever do, and I wouldn't want to do it, and how much of it is answering yes to the question?
I would say that it's answering yes to the question if it makes you feel uncomfortable to discuss that activity with someone who is homosexual. If it doesn't make you uncomfortable or feel ashamed or guilty for having that discussion, then no. You can answer no to that question. Just because you don't want to participate in it doesn't mean that it makes you uncomfortable. Sorry.
Well,
Getting
are you claiming that there's no secular reason to have any of these feelings? I mean, can't you be shy just being secular? It doesn't, I mean, I could answer yes to some of these without having any religious hang-ups about it.
The religious hang-ups are inbred in our society. In the Western culture in which we live, part of the hang-ups is the Western culture of where we live. Like, that's what I'm talking about. It's completely inbred in our culture. So even if you are a shy person, you should still be able to talk about these things with your intimate partner. Like that should always be an open form of communication. If that communication barrier is there, then that needs to be worked through.
I understand that, I just don't see how it's religious.
Well, some of those benefits, I think what you're saying is because in societies where we don't have these cultures, people don't have the same feelings.
Right.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah, no, that's a better way of saying it than I did. Is that
Not quite.
well, okay, we'll just keep going.
Oh, yeah, kind of, I guess, following on the last couple questions, I was basically going to ask, like, how do you distinguish between when, for an individual person, the motivation, or, the fear or shame that they feel is primarily religious in motivation, like they recognize that it's because of their upbringing and what their religion taught them, or, whether they're feeling this purely because of societal influences, because, say you could be non-religious, but then have an aversion to homosexuality just as a cultural influence, like, in like a lot of hip-hop music or popular music, it seems shameful, there's a lot of homophobic language there. So how do you distinguish between whether the individual, the fear or shame that they feel comes from their religious upbringing or the culture itself, which might have been religiously influenced?
In our culture, it is religiously influenced.
Yeah, but that,
In ours.
like, does your research distinguish between like where people are primarily getting messages from? I mean, it may be all religious, but are they seeing it? Are they seeing I feel this way because of religion, or I feel this way because of culture? Even though it's religion indirectly, they don't associate it with religion.
But
No,
that's
we
the
did not
thing,
ask
though. The culture was managed to think that it's a shameful thing. So even if your religious upbringing didn't have anything to do with the shame, the culture itself comes pretty much. We all know this. Pretty much, religion came with our moral codes and everything. So I guess that's where it comes from. At the end of the day, even if it was just the culture was pretty much managed at some point by religion, and that's why there's the shame in the first place.
Yes.
Yeah, I've talked with Daryl about this too on several occasions because you come a little bit close to having some research bias by saying that all of this is by nature innately religious. For an example, people were told to have sex only within marriage, not only for religious reasons, but for property reasons, inheritance reasons, etc., that weren't necessarily, and I'm talking about Western civilization as a whole, not the American culture in the 20th and 21st century, but it's not exactly one-on-one correlation, guilt, shame, religion, when guilt, shame about sex is something that cultures have through various means, not just religion. Are you really equating all of that purely with religion? All the guilt, all the fear about sex is religious?
Between Daryl Ray and I, yes, we are.
Okay. That's what he's told me to, and I have a big question
Do
also
you
about
have
that.
data on that? I mean, I think several of us have the same question. Like, yeah, obviously religion has an influence, but boy, it sure doesn't seem like the whole story. But you seem very positive that it is. Could you discuss why?
Through my education that I've done with 7 years of studying human sexuality, as well as doing a sex and secularism survey and understanding as well anthropology and other forms and cultures that have existed over the years, and our current culture does agree with this statement. That's where we're taking it from.
I wanted to
Okay.
take the argument from authority.
Like,
I do,
why,
but
like it's either this, like either gay, like you hate gay people because why? Because God tells you to, or you hate gay people because what they do with their bodies.
I love you.
Yeah, but I mean, like somebody be like, oh, I hate gay people because God tells me to, but somebody could be like, oh, I hate gay people because what they do with their bodies. That's where it comes from. It just comes from that natural ability. Like somebody has the ability to hate somebody, just natural.
But we are going to have to charge through. We're just going to have to charge through. I'm sorry. We're going to have to keep moving forward. Save them for the end. Just hold it there. Hold Post-it note in your brain. And I promise, I really hope you can answer them in the end. Or see me afterwards, and I will answer them. I promise you, before you leave, I will answer your question. As a secular sexual, we're going to move on. And you need to understand these next 3 words to be ultimate. Safe, sane, and consensual. These are 3 words that most of us don't even really think about when it comes to our sexual activity. But the definition of safe for being a secular sexual means, does this activity cause harm, not necessarily hurt, but cause harm to you or your partner psychologically, emotionally, or physically? Now, this can happen in a variety of ways. I'm sorry, now I've got to look at my notes. You will need to look at this particular activity in which you would like to partake in, weigh out the precautions this activity involves, and determine if it is safe for you and your partner to partake in. An example would be bondage. There are a lot of rules and safety precautions that you need to put in place in order to tie someone up. Do anybody have an idea as to what those might be? A code word is smart. Safe words can be a simple red, yellow, green tag that's the most often used, or you can pick something like Badger or Fruit Loops. I've heard those used. I know, those are just strange. Anything else?
You gotta learn how to tie the damn knots.
Very smart. I get 3, you're screwed. That's true. You can always cut them out.
True.
That's risky. You could cut them. Other ways, you need to ensure that you're using things to tie them that won't leave marks if they cannot have marks left on their body, on their wrists, where they can be easily seen. That's a big safety precaution because some things will leave marks. You know, there are cuffs that have spikes in them that leave damage, and it's purposeful. Make sure that the person can communicate with you, and also make sure that that person is lying flat on their back, or they're in a seated position, or in a position that they can easily breathe. That is something a lot of people forget. They lay someone down face down because they want to give them a back massage, and they suffocate in the pillows. Not smart. Not a smart idea. Another way to be safe is for everyone in this room to go and get yourself tested. I know. A lot of you are like, I'm an adult. I have sex with 1 person. Why do I need to go and get tested? Because you never know. Your partner could be sleeping around with 50 people. You don't know. You really don't. As much as you want to trust them and love them and care for them, you never know. So getting yourself tested once a year is a great safety precaution for you. It keeps you safe, and it makes sure that you are keeping your partner safe. It's very simple and easy. It's a urine test and a blood test. Or for HIV, you can get in and get a swab done if you don't like needles. But it's very simple and easy, depending on the panel that you want to do, because there's hundreds of different STIs available for you to partake in. They'll take different types of testing that way. Also, depending on the number of sexual partners that you have, once a year may not be enough. You may need to go every month, every 4 months, every 3 months. It all depends on the number of partners. If you have sex with someone once a week and it's different every single week, then you're a once a monther. You need to go in every month and get tested. You really don't want to go more than that because the free clinics don't give you more than that. So, unless you can afford to get tested every week after that sexual partner, which really wouldn't help because it takes about 7 to 14 days for any kind of STI to show up. And most STIs are asymptomatic, which means so you have no idea if you're a carrier or not. And most men are carriers. Most men don't actually develop any symptoms, they just like to pass it. It's fantastic. As of right now, 15 to 24-year-olds are 3 times as likely to contract chlamydia, 3 times as likely to get gonorrhea, and twice as likely to get syphilis. So all of you people in college, you should be very concerned and get yourself tested. Next, we're going to talk about what it means to be sane. Sane means does this activity going to mentally scar the partner I'm with or myself? Am I being reasonable in my request with my partner for this fantasy or sexual activity, or is this a rational or reasonable decision? For example, is it sane to participate in a sex act that involves blood exchange? This is where someone would cut themselves and you as well, and you would continue in your sex act, and blood would get into each other's wounds and all over everywhere. And who knows what's going to happen, who knows what you're exposed to. Does that sound pretty sane? Does it sound safe? No, not at all. That's insane, really. And you should probably tell your partner that they need to go get some help with that kind of sexual fantasy. Next, here's our big one, consensual. This is where you communicate with your partner about what you want to happen during the sex session ahead of time. Cannot stress this enough to you. Ahead of time, not during, not after the fact, ahead. And it has to be verbally agreed, and they have to agree to everything that is going to happen. If it's not agreed upon, what would it be considered? Rape. Exactly. Now, this is really cool because recently here in January of 2012, the Justice Department redefined rape. Rape now has been expanded to more different kinds of the type of crime and include men as victims. The crime of rape is defined as penetration, no matter how slight, of the vagina or anus with any body part or object, or oral penetration by a sex organ of another person without the consent of a victim. Basically, you cannot just get things going and then reach down for the nether regions and be like, woohoo, without that person's consent ahead of time. Honestly, the favorite sentence that almost every man or woman would love to hear would be, is this okay for you? Is this going too far? Those questions are perfect to ask. They take 2 seconds and then they can answer with, oh yeah, baby, let's keep going. Or, no, actually, I would really like to stop. It's just too far for me right now. I'd like to take a step back. And then they're going to trust you because you recognize they said no and you stopped. And that's a big deal, especially right now. Right now in the atheist community or secular community, however you'd like to term it, rape and sexual harassment is pretty ongoing and happening more and more, unfortunately. There are more women crying out from sexual harassment than ever before, from sexual advances that they didn't want because the person didn't communicate with them very well, or they didn't understand that person was hitting on them. Not that atheist men are to blame, but it is something that is occurring and needs to be recognized. So each and every one in here right now, you know the definition of consensuality, you understand what that means, and you can move forward and do things as appropriately as possible.
Where is this coming from? Is there like a statistically significant study that demonstrates this, or what is the empirical data that you're referring to?
When it comes to the atheist community, it's not only myself who's experienced this, and when it comes to rape, but also it is from other women who have come forward at atheist conventions. It's mainly what I'm talking about that I've attended personally, as well as talking to other people who have done those conventions when it comes to organizing them as women coming forward. And it is happening more and more. It's not just one, it's becoming 2 or 3, and then the 2 or 3 has become 4. It's just becoming something that's getting a little out of hand, and that's why you're hearing more and more at conferences understand what sexual harassment is and understand that we will throw you out. Like, that's happening more and more at the beginning of conferences, especially ones that have had that happen at their conference before.
But just to clarify, I was wondering if there's any empirical data on the issue.
No.
Okay.
Well, I've heard sort of back and forth on this topic, and you know, one side that I've heard is there has never been a single police report filed for any.
I would be the first then.
Okay,
I
but
filed a police report.
Okay,
For
so there
rape.
has been.
So that has been done at least for one count of rape that
At a
I'm aware
conference?
of at a conference.
Okay.
So I'm obviously not ashamed of it. You should never be ashamed if that happens to you. You should talk about it very openly. So, and to ensure that it never happens to anyone else. So always, if that happens to you, tell someone and file a police report. That's the best thing you can do. And hopefully legal action is taken. So with the other women that were involved, it was just sexual harassment. And honestly, even though we did contact the police, there wasn't really anything that they thought they could do. So it's kind of a toss-up. Now, on to a happier topic. Different expressions of human sexuality. I feel everyone kind of knows the definition of sex, but just to be sure, sex means the biological definition of the human reproductive parts you're born with, male or female. When it comes to gender, that's a societal construct in which one must participate in the dress, actions, and thoughts of that particular gender role or identity. Make sense? Okay. Now, we have this wonderful acronym in the sexuality community of L, G, B, T, Q, I, A, and what we hope to add soon is P. But what in the world does all of that mean? That is a mouthful. When you say it really fast, LGBTQIAP, that's just a lot. My husband likes to say EDS, everything is straight. It's a lot easier. But the community is trying to be much more inclusive. So we have lesbian. I have a feeling everyone knows what that means. And gay. And bisexual. I'm going to go ahead and tell you the definition of bisexual because it does need to be clarified. Bisexual means that somebody who is a self-identifying male or female is attracted to other males or females. And that's the assumption. Next, we have what's called trans. Just trans, no stuff on the end yet, because trans is an umbrella term for these three. There's transsexual, transgender, and transvestite. A transsexual person is defined as someone who is completely through their process of becoming a transsexual, just completely through the process. They are post-op. They have went from male to female, MTF, or female to male. They've gone through their psychological process, the point in which cross-dressing happens, and they live their lives as their gender that they would like to display. And they've gone through their hormone therapy, they've had their breasts removed or added, and they've had their genitalia changed to the sex that they want it to be. That's how transsexual is defined. Transgender is the process of full sex change or identifies with the opposite gender and lives as that gender in real life. They don't want to necessarily have an operation done, but they want to live as that opposite sex that gender identifies for them. And then a transvestite is a person that likes to dress, and typically it's men who like to dress in women's clothing, but it does go the other way as well. And they feel the most comfortable dressing in the opposite sex. And they usually do this either in private or with their intimate partner or in a group setting. There are actual groups that do meet and they get together in their dress and have a grand old time, just like a party any of us would throw. So that's the difference between those. Next would be Q, which stands for queer or questioning. Now, queer is something relatively new. It's considered a term coined by a younger generation, typically those between 15 and 30, trying to take on this new word. It's an umbrella term for sexual minorities that are heterosexual, heteronormative, or gender binary. They basically, in the context of Western identity politics, the term also acts as a label setting queer identifying people apart from discourse, ideologies, and lifestyles that typify mainstream LGBT communities as being oppressive or assimilationist. Does that make sense? And then questioning is literally a person who has no fucking clue. They have no idea. It's not that they are aware of who they're attracted to. They just don't quite understand if they are lesbian or gay or homosexual or something else. They're just not quite sure if that label necessarily fits them. So they're going to call themselves questioning because they're still working on figuring out which label actually fits or if they even want to take on a label. Next we have intersex. This was added. It's not technically a sexuality, which is why I always question why they put this in. It's actually just a form of biological differentiation that has basically proves evolution to the greatest degree. I think it's the coolest thing. It's a person displaying both genitalia either externally or internally. They may not be aware until puberty or even later or never. It never manifests itself in a way that they're aware. It occurs typically during ovum and sperm production and appears typically from mutated sperm, or a term called non-disjunction. It's when the sperm is forming and that chromosome, that Y or that X, doesn't form properly. A variety of forms and types, but typically unnoticeable to the general public. Here are a few pictures, and I'll kind of tell you what each syndrome is because they're kind of most common. This is an example of someone who has XYY. They have 47 chromosomes, and instead of 46, and a person with XYY is 1 in 1,000 births in the United States. The characteristics include abnormal growth averaging about 3 inches above normal height. That's it. They have average intelligence or even high intelligence. They aren't any more aggressive than any other person. Just because they have that extra Y chromosome doesn't mean there's a higher level of testosterone or anything like that. It's just an extra Y. And these are studies done by, it's called ISNA, Intersex Society for National Awareness, for basically intersex people. Then we have what's considered Klinefelter syndrome, or XXY. And as you can see on this picture, it's frontal baldness is absent. They tend to grow fewer chest hairs. There is breast development, but not really all that much, so it would just look like a girl who has like A cup breasts. They have more narrow shoulders, they have longer arms and legs. They do produce pubic hair, and they do have a slight penis. It would be a smaller penis, about 4 inches rather than the typical 6, and they'll have wide hips as well. Klinefelter syndrome occurs in 1 in 1,000 births as well. Then we have Turner syndrome, which is fairly obvious. Turner syndrome is something that is much more fatal. It is not a condition that anyone really wants, and it's the absence of your other sex chromosome. And that's why they call it XO or X. You only have 45 instead of 46. And basically, it encompasses several conditions in human females. It gives you the characteristics include short stature, swelling, broad chest, low hairline, low set ears. You can see those on the picture, and webbed necks. Girls with Turner syndrome typically experience gonadal dysfunction, non-working ovaries, which results in amenorrhea, cessation of your menstrual cycle, and sterility. Health concerns are frequently present, including congenital heart disease, hypothyroidism, and diabetes, vision problems, hearing concerns, and many autoimmune diseases. And there's also a specific pattern of cognitive deficits, particularly visuospatial, mathematical, and memory areas. So that's not a good one to get. Here is hypospadias. This is where the urethral opening in the perineum or along the penile shaft is not in its proper place. If you see on the first one, it's not up here, it's down a bit. It's not at the top, it's in the middle, and at the bottom, it actually looks like the penis goes into where a vaginal urethral opening would actually be. And hypospadias, depending on which one it is, the urethral opening in the perineum or along the penile shaft, which would be the last two, is 1 in 2,000 births. And the hypospadias, where it's higher up toward the tip, is 1 in 770. And again, that's from the ISNA website data that they collected.
One quick question.
Yes.
These are U.S. statistics, not worldwide.
Correct. And basically, here is what's considered male pseudohermaphroditism 1. And if you can see, it's where the penis is actually internal to give the mons a little bit of a larger effect. You can actually kind of see that there's a penis there when you're just looking at the mons pubis. And there is a bit of a vaginal opening as well. And if you actually were able to spread into there, you could see that the clitoris looks more like a penis rather than an actual clitoris, and will actually elongate and get hard just like a penis. So then we have female pseudohermaphroditism, where basically you have a female whose clitoris looks like a penis. Then there's the urethral opening here. There is no vaginal opening. There's the anus. And on the internal structure, you will find that she does have a uterus, and she does have a bit of fallopian tube and ovary, but she'll also have a testicle as well. Then there is male pseudohermaphroditism 2, where basically if you see on the top picture, it kind of just looks like a normal female. Nobody really noticed that at all. I mean, not much. It's just a very small vaginal opening. Clitoris looks intact. Labia look intact. But if you were actually able to cut that person open, which you obviously do, you would see that the clitoris is actually a very large penis hidden inside the mons pubis. And they typically only have a uterus and one working ovary. If the other ovary may not work at all, or it doesn't form. We also have true hermaphroditism, and that's someone who displays outwardly a male characteristic, but inwardly have female characteristics, and vice versa. So if you see on the male side, the bottom is actually a testicle, and the other, and hidden down below, actually kind of hangs down, and the other one is a uterus, a fallopian tube, and an ovary that's detached. So they would be considered sterile. They're not going to be able to reproduce because they cannot form reproductive ovum or sperm in order to reproduce. And in a female, it typically looks fairly normal. Breasts develop normally. The clitoris is typically a little enlarged, and they also have the same differentiation with kind of half of a uterus and ovary and only one testicle. And again, sterile. So that's all of those wonderful types of asexuality. And in the end, the total number of people whose bodies differ from male or female is 1 in 100 births, and the total number of people receiving surgery to normalize these genital appearances is 1 or 2 in 1,000 births. And a lot of people in the intersex community are trying to stand up to get that genital mutilation stopped. It's kind of the same thing that's happening with female genital mutilation and male circumcision. It's things that should be done when they are adult and can make the decision for themselves. Most of these surgeries occur when they are infants, around 2 weeks old. So that's the disparity with intersex right now, is people are doing things that most of us would probably consider not that ethical. Asexual. Now, back into sexuality again. This is a person who lacks the sexual attraction to others or lack of interest in sex. A study in 2004 found that it only affects 1% of the population. So it's a very small number, but someone who is asexual doesn't really have an attraction template. Now, those that are attracted to women, which one do you think you'd like better? The one on the left? The one on the right? Give me some. Those attracted to men, one on the left, or our wonderful silver fox. That could just be me. For an asexual individual, this doesn't matter.
They might as well stay here.
Yeah, might as well. For an asexual person, it really is about an emotional connection, a psychological connection, or romantic feeling that they have with that person. Sex really doesn't factor in. The attractiveness doesn't really set in for them. It's just something that they don't really have or think about. It's just not on their mind. Not like it is on our mind. Like when we look at someone, we're like, ooh, nice ass, ooh, nice this. They can comment and they can be like, yeah, I guess in ass's ways, that's nice. But it's not something that factors in for them to choose a partner. Yes?
Are there any statistics on how often asexual people masturbate?
No, that's a good question. Very interesting. That is interesting. You know me that question. I'm going to forget that. That was interesting. Now, pansexual. Before I get into the definition, anyone know what that is?
Bread?
Doesn't matter.
I'll let her answer.
I mean,
Oh, I guess it's in the notes.
well,
I
it
guess I
is,
should
but
have
yeah. It's someone who is experiences sexual attraction or romantic attraction to like anyone, rather than bisexual being more strictly like heteronormative, male, female, whatever it could be, trans people or just whatever, just in general. Anybody's cool.
I'm actually a pansexual person. And basically what that means is regardless of sexual attraction, desire, romantic love, emotional attraction towards persons, I identify with anyone and everyone. If you fit my attraction template, then you're in the game. Doesn't matter if you're male, female, trans, intersex. As long as you and I connect on some formal level, good to go. You basically, as according to the Oxford English Dictionary, I kind of really like their definition. Not limited or inhibited in sexual choice with regards to gender or activity. I like that. All right.
Have you always felt that way, or is that a progression?
I did identify as bisexual because I really thought that was all there was, male and female, and that was at a really young age, around 16. And then once I met a transgendered person and realized that they were transgender, they did a really good job. Very beautiful woman, didn't know it all until after the fact. And that's an overwhelming surprise when they don't tell you ahead of time. Again, communication is key. And then I realized it really didn't bother me. I was actually very attracted to that woman, and the fact that she had breasts and a penis didn't factor in or bother me at all. It was just like an added bonus, like a best of both worlds. So, that's kind of how I started to research a little bit, and I was like, so what is that? Is that a different form of bisexuality, or what that was? And pansexuality is actually a newer term. It hasn't been around for very long, and so that's why it's something I identify more with now than I did in the past. Now that we've talked about all of those wonderful sexual orientations that you could possibly have, let's talk about the different forms of relationships you can have. Obviously, monogamy is one. Two people who are committed fully to one another and do not have sexual or emotionally intimate relationships with others outside of their tight company. Basically, the definition of that typically observed with marriage, and in our country, divorce shortly thereafter. Of course, it's a 50-50 shot anymore. Most people anymore, in the younger generation, there is more information out there now that cohabitation is occurring rather than marriage. I'm trying to remember that study. I think it was, I don't remember the name of it. I think it was the Trojan study that was done at the Kinsey Institute that talked about cohabitation among people between the ages of 20 and 30, basically. But I'm pretty sure that's where I remember it from. I find monogamy to be absolutely pointless. We are not a species that should do monogamy, in my view. That's my opinion, personal opinion. I find that to be setting yourself up for failure. Cheating does happen. There are rare people who can do monogamy. I applaud you for it. I'm not one of them. I'm not one of them. So, next, we'll talk about polyamory. That's my favorite, because that's what I am. It's literally defined as multiple love or lovers, however you would like to do a more love. Polyamory is the distribution of partners amongst each person in a relationship. Basically, there are many, many different types of polyamorous relationships. No one is the same as another, because there are different people involved, different dynamics that happen, and those people communicate with each other in different ways and have different reasons for being involved in multiple relationships. So no two are the same. But typically, there are ways to categorize the relationships where you call one person a constant. For me, my constant would be Adam. We are technically legally married and didn't come upon polyamory until after we were married for a couple of years. We were swingers before that, basically from the moment we got engaged. So we were never monogamous, really. And we were swingers before that, and then realized swinging wasn't really for us. To me and him, swinging was very unemotional. It was very just sex for pleasure. You basically fuck a couple of people and then you go home. It wasn't very all that satisfying, so we moved into polyamory so we could have that emotional and romantic connection with another person rather than just partner swapping. Basically, a constant is a partner that you are fully committed to no matter what and is in your life on a regular basis. You are in with them for the long haul. If there are moments of jealousy, if there are issues going on with time management, you work it out. You talk to each other and you keep moving forward. You try your best to not remove that constant stability in your life. Another term that is used by polyamorous people are called others. Others is a partner who is someone other than your constant. It's no hierarchy. It's just another person adding to a relationship, and hopefully everyone gets along and it's a harmonious, happy family. That doesn't happen. Most people don't like each other. I happen to not really enjoy one of Adam's girlfriends right now, but get along as best as possible. A primary is a different form of doing polyamorous relationships. It's where you establish a hierarchy, and a primary is someone who is primarily in your life. Then there's someone who's called a secondary. They're the second on the list. They aren't given as much attention. They aren't given as much say-so when it comes to decisions that you're going to make. When you're going to do something that's in accordance to scheduling or canceling on them, they're second on the list, kind of thing. And some people even go to tertiary, where they have a third partner, and basically they get the short end of the stick. They're considered last in everything. I don't find that to be a very smart way to do polyamory, because that's how jealousy can happen very, very quickly. That third person is going to get angry and jealous and most likely leave fairly quickly. They're not going to want to always be that third person and not considered important in your life. So I propose doing constant and others so nobody feels as though they're being put on a pedestal or on that low-ranking third. You know, it's like getting bronze in the Olympics. Nobody really wants that. Polygamy. Oh, horrible, horrible polygamy, right? If you're Mormon, Mormons have totally ruined this for all of us. They do it in an abusive, vulgar, horrible fashion where women don't get a say at all and they're forced into a situation they don't want to do. But as a secular sexual, think about this in a reasonable manner. You're a man, you're in love with 3 women. Those 3 women get along. They get along well, and they would love to live with you and share a life as a community of people raising a family together. Does that seem unreasonable?
Yeah.
It does.
You know, that's one of the things I want to say is I don't like polygamy, and I tell you why. In the Islamic society and in Mormon society, so a guy has 4 wives. You realize that would mean that leaves 3 real pissed off men who can't find wives. One of the biggest problems in Islamic society right now is these young men who can't afford wives, so they become terrorists. This is serious. Because they have no future in life.
It does. I do agree. Religion does pervert polygamy when
Yeah,
it
and
comes to how it works.
when we just don't realize, in the same way was China in the one child society, where you have where you're aborting the female babies, you got a lot of pissed off young men who can't find wives.
Exactly.
So anyway, that's one of my opinions.
I'm wondering why, like, you know, there's this openness and acceptance of polygamy, even if it's not something that you choose, but you're very, very down. It sounded to me like you were very, very down with monogamy. It's not natural, people shouldn't do it, it doesn't make any sense, it won't work. You know, and after this whole thing of being accepting of even something that you choose not for yourself, I'm just surprised because, like, personally, I don't necessarily choose monogamy, but I am monogamous. So, that's a choice I made, and I felt ashamed because I'm not as advanced or this or that, and that's just because that's something that was agreed upon 15 years ago when we married. That.
But it can change.
Right, it absolutely can change. But if it's not changing, if it's something that we're like, this works for us, I feel shamed by that now. So I'm just wondering, like, polygamy, it's like, well, if this works for them and everything, and then, and I haven't personally heard of any polygamous, non-religious, polygamous studies. And monogamy does, some monogamy works, some monogamy doesn't work, but if it's something that people choose to be said, well, it's not natural, it shouldn't be done, I don't think anyone should do this. That to me seemed like a shaming thing.
I'm sorry for that. It was just more my personal opinion on it because I particularly.
Yeah, we have personal opinions that I don't want to do this, but if somebody else does, right? Because isn't that the whole point of this secular sexual thing is that that's okay, that's good for you, right?
Right, but when you've seen study after study of monogamy honestly not working in our culture, it's one of those things, like, you have to look at the data that's in front of you, and it's a 50-50 shot of it working, and those that technically kind of work have instances of cheating, have instances of just horrible sex lives, and just, there's all of these negative things that are associated with it. It's one of those things, you have to look at the bad and the good.
But that's the same with polygamy, right? Like,
right.
There's a lot of negative things, but you're still saying we should, like, not shut our minds to it.
Right.
So I would say monogamy is the same thing. There are a lot of polyamorous relationships that come to an end.
Oh,
Same
yeah.
thing with monogamous relationships. They get a divorce. If you're just living together and you're polygamous, things come to an end. They end in both situations, and some stay together in both situations. So it seems to me like there are good and bad. It's just what works for people, and sometimes it doesn't work. Whether you're polygamous or polyamorous or monogamous or there's sure we have had a lot of marriage, and that has been a very important thing because of religion, and as that's changing. But if you're not religious and you still get married and you choose to be monogamous, it could work just as likely as if you were polyamorous.
Absolutely, that's true. It can work, but I think what Amanda's point is that society-wise, it doesn't work, and here's why: because monogamous people get divorced. Because monogamous people date one person, and then they date another person, and then they date another person. So they're not truly, in this sense, monogamous. They not stay with the same being for the entirety of their life.
But polyamorous people do the same.
Exactly, because what they're coming from is that we don't have to stay with one being. We can love all these beings, and the beauty, well, now I'm going to get preachy, and I apologize. But the beauty of polyamory is that I can date one person, and I can date another person, and I can date another person, and I still can love and be with this person, and I still can love and be with this person, and still can love me, and nobody has to get hurt, and nobody loses, and nobody gets left out. So, but monogamy is rare, and it's beautiful if you can do it. I've seen people that can do beautiful monogamy. Oh, how could you live like that? Put them in a brain scan. It's really freaking cool. Their dopamine's going like crazy.
I have no idea the order of who raised their hand first.
Sorry.
Mine's pretty quick. So.
Okay.
Darrell has commented on the concept of serial monogamy and saying that should be redefined as polyamory. Could you comment on that?
I don't find that to really be polyamory, because polyamory is more about dating multiple people at the same time.
Yeah.
Serial monogamy is dating one person, breaking up, dating another person, breaking up, dating another person, breaking up, that kind of thing, or marrying multiple times.
Yeah.
So we disagree on that concept, but we disagree a lot. I get.
First,
sure.
First, a quick question. This definition looks like a religious definition. Because it only allows men to have multiple.
It's honestly
partners.
out of because we'll get to the next one for females.
The second thing is, we're talking about relationships. There's another convention called marriage, which is a different type of convention that is imposed upon a lot of these relationships that creates the legal child custody issues that go further than just the sexual expression. Yeah.
But yay! I think it was her and then you.
I'm not asking this question to, make a moral judgment or any sort of value judgment whatsoever, but my question is, do you know of any, the number that, 50% of marriages end in divorce and stuff gets thrown around a lot. I'm wondering if you know of any statistics regarding how many polyamorous groupings or couples actually stay permanently with their constant partner versus how many monogamous couples stay with their constant partner. Is the number more if they're
19% of people who are married and then become polyamorous divorce. I do know that statistic. Now, I can get the website to you and show you that survey, but I don't know the other ones by heart. The only reason I remember that one is because it pertains to me.
I'm curious, I guess, if your goal is to have one constant partner that is a source of emotional stability to you for your lifetime, if there's any statistics on whether monogamous relationships or polygamous relationships with a constant partner are more likely to succeed in that outcome. Do you know if there's any data on that question?
I don't.
I think that would be an interesting study.
I would have to go to the survey that was done on polyamorous people, which there weren't very many. I think it was only about 300. So it's very hard to really stretch that.
That would be interesting data to have, especially if we're going to talk about the effectiveness of monogamy versus polygamy. Because I feel like there isn't.
Well, polygamy, honestly, because most is in a religious standpoint and it's done in an abusive manner. I'm talking about.
Or I guess polyamory. I used the wrong term.
Okay. I should have looked that up. Honestly, I writing this at 6 o'clock in the morning and just kind of forgot to do that. But I can pull up the website and give it to you. There is a survey on it. I just don't have those figures off the top of my head. Yes.
Just a brief comment on that. Because polyamory is relatively new in the field of sociology, I mean, it's been around for a while. Just the term, the word, the phenomenon of polyamory has been around for a while. But it's still fairly new, so any sociological studies that have been done on it so far are going to be very, very, very limited in scope and are not going to be able to determine very much. And there's definitely no longitudinal studies on polyamory. It just hasn't been done because it's still a relatively new phenomenon.
It just seems to me that we should hesitate to make claims about whether or not monogamy or polyamory are more effective groupings for humans until we can see which one actually, you know what I mean? Until we have that.
I know that there's the tendency to see what Amanda was doing as being a comparative thing, but what she really was saying is monogamy's not effective. Let's see what the fuck else is out there.
Yeah.
Well,
then there's polyandry.
I think we'd be well off to recognize different things are effective for different people. I mean, we're talking way too much universally, or it all has to be this or that.
Right. Then there's polyandry, which kind of is different than polygamy. A lot of people probably haven't heard about it. Polyandry is when female partners with multiple male partners. So it's the exact opposite of polygamy. It's the same concept. All of the same things we've talked about with it are the same. It doesn't occur all that often. It occurs in seahorses. In the human populations, I would enjoy that, but I haven't found men that are willing to worship the ground I walk on, so
There's nothing as awful as coming downstairs and saying, "You mean none of you took out the garbage?"
It also occurs in a short word called phalaropes. The actual sexual dimorphism occurs first in the male and female, and the female is the one who has little harems of males.
Actually, I haven't heard about that. That's cool.
Redneck Red and Wilson's.
One more time for those who didn't hear.
The phalarope thing? Yeah, phalaropes will do. That's a shorebird that breeds up in the tundra. There's redneck, and Wilson's phalarope. And the female, the sexual dimorphism of the coloration is reversed. The females are more colorful, and they actually maintain little harems of males. It's one of the few examples in the avian world that occurs.
So yeah, it occurs in the end.
There's a culture or two that has occurred of usually ways that you have too many brothers and too much land, so you don't want to split it up, so you have to marry the same woman. They all marry that same woman. She takes care of their kids and they keep their land in one family.
All right, fun stuff. BDSM. Everyone excited now? It's about that time. We'll run through it really quickly. Bondage. Looks like that. DS, dominant submission. Basically, it's a person who has a form of relationship where there's dynamic between the two people who play a role with one another during sexual activity, where one person has most of the control during the session and the other person submits to him. Very simple. MS is what that was supposed to say. I forgot it. It's a master-slave dynamic, and it's typically a 24/7 lifestyle where a person is master or mistress over a slave. And that's a person who is in servitude in various ways, whether that's serving them their dinner, doing financial control, and things like that. It's tons of variations on it. That's basically what it is. Then there's S for sadism, where you enjoy inflicting pain on others, and masochism, where you enjoy receiving pain in a variety of forms. Everyone must remember in BDSM, if you're going to partake in it, it is not legal to sign off on your own beating. The person who is beating you or doing whatever it is to you that could harm you in some form or fashion, they can get legally prosecuted and put in jail for doing whatever they have done to you, even if you don't want to prosecute them. The state can say, no, we're going to prosecute them for that because you nearly died. So, tough luck. This is typically where safe, sane, and consensual come in, but in the BDSM community, Kingsters have been coining another term called RAC, and that is risk-aware consensual kink. It's basically you weigh out the pros and cons of the situation, you understand everything fully and have all the education available to you to know what's going right, what's going wrong, and how to get out of that scene effectively. And that takes us to the wonderful fun thing at the end that we all want to do. It's what I'm waiting for so I can get you all out of here in a relatively sweet piece of time. So this is our wonderful mystery bag. This is what I was promising you for those who have been on Facebook. This is how I can help you transform your sex life for $20. How many people can get any sex toy for $20 or less that's actually worthwhile? Okay, besides going to the cheap sites where you can
No, take it. Take
where you can get them on clearance. Other than that. So I'm going to reach into my wonderful bag of goodies and show you instead of passing them around, well, I'll still pass them around, those that are fun to pass around. These are clothespins. What can you do with clothespins? Nipple torture. Nipple torture. Pinch their skin under their arms. Ooh, hurts. Pinch the inner thigh. Pinch the butt. All fun things. How about latex gloves? What can you do with latex gloves? Lots of things. You can put your fingers in their mouth. You don't have to actually feel their mouth and rub on their tongue, things like that. That's always fun to do. It's kind of torturous, especially the person getting it done to them, because they're like spewing slobber all over themselves. It's very humiliating. Always fun. What can this be used for? This looks like happy. This one. Feel it.
Tickle torture. Grooming pubic hair? Oh, wow.
What is it? Is it soft or rough?
It's like velour.
Yeah, it's nice. You can pass it around. Let people feel it. What about finger paint? Ooh. Lay down big tarp and have a go. Figure out what you can paint on each other. Turtles, fish, random colors. It can be fun. Yeah, heard that. What about this? Cats love it. What can you use it for? Tickle? Tickle or just rub them? I mean, if you touch those feathers, they're actually nice and soft. How about clothesline? It's $1 at Walmart. $1. You can tie someone up in a variety of ways. Hog tie, lots of fun ways. You could. It's actually pretty long. I think it's like 50 feet long. You can do a lot of cool things. If you know shibari, that's horrible rope to use for that. And you can tie them up with like corsets on them and all sorts of. Look up shibari online. It's very neat. It is. What can you do if you have a couple of beautiful, yeah, I didn't use that right. Wonderful handkerchiefs. Blindfold. Tie them up. Gag them. Gag your feet, or tie your feet up. Gag your feet, yeah, that's gonna work out for you. What else, Ashley? Remember that's your penis. And most people are gonna spank your ass with it. What about the happy wooden spoon? Everyone has one of these in their kitchen, right? You don't even have to go to Walmart. Typically have a wooden spoon in the kitchen. If you bake chocolate chip cookies and you do not have a wooden spoon, you better go buy one. Otherwise you're tainting your cookies and they'll take awful record.
Don't tell your kids what you use.
Yeah. Wash it. Don't wash it, take your cookies. It's funny.
Did the term tainting have something to do with what you can do with it?
Or you can keep a special spoon in your bedroom. If your kids ask you why there's a spoon in your drawer, avoid. Or be open and honest and see what happens. These are cute, soft and cuddly, stretchy, little cushions. And so, let's pretend you're in candlelit room and those are going off and you see them in the side of your eyes and you know what's coming for you. You can massage someone with it because there's that little ball in there, so you can take it over someone's back and rub that on them. Or you can kind of use it to torture them if they don't like that kind of slimy feeling. Here's another one. Pass this other direction. It's a weird texture. And it leaves a weird texture on your skin as well. It leaves an after feel that most people kind of don't like. So if they don't like that, you can take it and rub it on their face. Just so mean. And so, yeah, we kind of ran out of time. You have notes to refer to if I missed anything. But hopefully that kind of helped open your minds up a bit to what there is available out there to you when it comes to your sex life and different ways you can have fun without having to go into a sex shop.